Welcome to the Power Podcast. I'm Aaron Larson, Executive Editor of Power, and on today's show I'm joined by Heather Rosentrader. She is the Senior Vice President for Energy Delivery and Shared Services with Avista Utilities. Avista is a company that provides electric service and natural gas to customers in a service territory that covers about 30,000 square miles in eastern Washington, northern Idaho, and parts of southern and eastern Oregon. I'm also joined by Ash Awad. He is the Chief Market Officer for McKinstry. McKinstry is a company that focuses on designing, constructing, operating, and maintaining high-performing buildings. Thank you both for joining me. To kick things off, I'd like to talk about a project that the two of your companies are working on in Spokane, Washington. Some people have called it the 5 smartest city blocks in the world. I believe the location is actually known as the South Landing Project. Ash, I'll start with you, and please tell listeners a little bit about it. What makes this 5-block area so smart, and what does it have that maybe a typical urban community doesn't?
Yeah, thanks. And hey, thanks for taking the time with us. This is a super exciting project, and looking forward to sharing as much about it as we possibly can in this time that we have together. Well, let me start by saying that I think, the idea that Scott Morris, the CEO of Avista and now the chairman of Avista, started off with was this idea that instead of keeping this land for just basic utility infrastructure, he, in short, and maybe Heather and others can elaborate on this, but he, in short, wanted to do something much more community focused, much more focused on enhancing a part of Spokane that actually needed some enhancing. So I think when we think about the 5 smartest city blocks idea, we don't think of it as just tech. We think of it from the standpoint, first and foremost, of the type of collaboration that needed to happen. Typically, when a development is happening, the developer and the general contractor and the architect are really working from a top-down perspective. So one of the biggest aspects of this being smart is the fact that we collaborated not just in ways that normally isn't done. For instance, we collaborated together, us and Avista, McKinstry and Avista, to think differently about how energy moves. And I know we're going to talk about that more, but how energy is moved so that we don't actually build special buildings, smart buildings that actually have a detrimental effect on the grid. We partnered and worked closely with manufacturing ideas that brought cross-laminated timber strategies into the buildings. But then we actually worked with the community, and we thought a lot about what does this southern part of the university district need, and working quite closely with the higher ed community and the greater Spokane area to think about some of those elements. I want to start there because, to me, when I think of the first aspect of SMART, I actually think about the collaboration, the people, the community parts that we really spent a lot of time thinking about. Now, there are other aspects of SMART. For instance, I mentioned the cross-laminated timbers. Could talk a little bit more about the technologies, the number of sensors that we've actually put into the buildings that allow for, very smart ways of how we operate both the mechanical and the electrical system, to include the lighting systems. I could talk about the idea that, for instance, we deployed very sophisticated manufacturing strategies and built out mechanical, electrical, plumbing appliances in ways that have never been done before. Or this shared energy model where, again, we collaborated with Avista to build something that would not only allow for the moving and sharing of energy between two buildings, but to do it in a way that actually allowed for the growth across a broader neighborhood, and done in a way that is both good for the buildings and good for the grid. So there's a number of those things that I think are very sophisticated, very smart. Clearly a lot of technology, a lot of data, a lot of sensing. But let me just share one last thing that makes this a very, very smart development. It's replicable. This project is being built highly sophisticated, zero energy, zero carbon, probably one of the best developments done in the United States from a collaborative perspective. And we're doing all this at no cost premium. And we're doing it all so that we can actually not only evangelize and tell people about this project, but so that others can learn about this project and apply the exact techniques on their projects and not feel like they're going to break the bank doing it. So sorry about such a long-winded answer, but so much to be proud of relative to how smart this development and these blocks are going to be.
No, that's very interesting. And I do want to get to Heather too, but while I've still got you, I kind of like to visualize in my mind, what does this area look like? What are these buildings used for? Are they residential buildings? Are they, shops and stores? Is it a combination? Is there commercial buildings or office space?
Great question. Yeah, great question. Right now, this development has started off with, as a matter of fact, we're doing the ribbon cutting, opening up of two buildings. One is 160,000 square foot cross-laminated timber, which is a wood building. The primary tenant in that building is going to be Eastern Washington University, and they're actually going to move in 3 programs. They're going to move in their electrical engineering, computer science, and visual design and communication group. Those are 3 groups that are thinking of actually moving additional groups in. Now, there's also private entities that are going to be moving into the building. For instance, McKinstry's determining likely that we're going to move into this very special building as well. But we have other private entities. So this is really a public-private partnership in one of the buildings as an example. By the way, this building, this 160,000 square foot building called Catalyst, that building is a zero energy, zero carbon building. And it's full of classrooms and office space. And it is very, very comfortable and very inviting. 5 stories, and I could go on if you want to know more details about it. The second building to be developed in this neighborhood is the Morris Center, named after Scott Morris. And that center actually is really focused on energy innovation and is going to have a number of different partners in that building, to include Avista's R&D, customer service focus. But we've also got a couple of startups that are really focused on energy that are going to go into that building. And in that particular building also happens to be the central location for the energy sharing systems and equipment. That's a smaller building. It's about 40,000 square feet. But those are the first 2 buildings to kind of start off this larger neighborhood. Hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives me kind of a visual there. So Heather, getting to you, how did Avista get involved in the South Landing project, and why did the company feel it was important?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I also wanted to thank you for inviting us. We love talking about what we're doing here. We're really excited about it. And for Avista as a utility, I'm sure people could ask, well, why is a utility, involved in a development like this? And Avista in general, our history, one of our core values is innovation. And so we saw the opportunity. We actually had the land designated originally for a substation, I think, as Ash kind of alluded to, and recognized that in this area that there could be much bigger opportunities for us to provide value to the community and to our customers long term. And so, one of our, as a utility, we recognize that a healthy community creates a healthy utility. And so that's at the core of, being involved in this kind of a development, is recognizing the value that it can bring to the community in terms of attracting, businesses and just providing economic development in this area. So that's a big piece of why we're involved. And then another really exciting part of being involved from a utility perspective is this opportunity to help work towards one of the most challenging, I think, components of our energy future, is being able to provide that clean energy future that we know we need to move towards, and do it reliably, but also do it affordably. Because we know that, yes, you can provide a clean energy future, and there's a lot of mechanisms to do that. But a lot of those mechanisms, if they're not done intentionally and thoughtfully, can be very expensive for customers. And so the opportunity, as Ash described, of the partnership here, of breaking down that barrier between the building designer and building operator and the inhabitants of the building and the grid and the generation supply operator, really creates that opportunity to find much more affordable solutions to that clean energy future. And affordable from the perspective of not just the technology solutions that we're going to be able to pilot and test out with the eco district, as Ash described, but also continuing to shift the business model from a regulatory opportunity to make sure that we're incentivizing the right things for our customers and the utilities, that they have common interests and common incentives that lead us towards, that affordable clean energy future. The partnership we have with the building operator is very different than utilities normally have. We're really, again, breaking down those barriers. And then all of the data sensors that Ash talked about as well, having that rich data both on the building side and on the utility side, and being able to share that and operate the buildings in a grid-friendly way is what really creates that affordability, that clean energy future in an affordable way.
Yeah, that sounds really innovative, how you're partnering with all these different people. Is this something new? Like, is this a new way of doing business that you created for this project specifically, or are you doing this in many other places throughout your territory?
Right. So we've started many smart grid projects several years ago with actually the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act back in 2009. And then we built on that with participating in a community-wide smart city effort. And then we've also been involved in the state of Washington has several clean energy funds that they've supported over the years that we've participated in. So we've continued to build on a foundation of leveraging automation and communication and advances in metering to be able to operate our grid in a different way. And so at this point, with the partnerships with the customer, we're building on what we've done before. But this is a unique partnership with the building operator and owner than we've been able to do before. But just as Ash said, we expect it to be replicable, beyond this project. And I also wanted to mention that, one of the things that Avista put in place, I think about a year ago, are clean energy goals. And so we, as a utility, have a goal for to be carbon neutral by 2027 and a goal to be carbon free by 2045. And so this kind of project really helps us find those tools to get to achieve those goals, again, in the most affordable way for our customers.
Yeah, that's great goals to have to get to those carbon neutral and carbon free energy systems. So concerning this project, I'm sure there was a lot of coordination between both Avista and McKinstry. What other partners were involved? I know you mentioned the university, a building owner. Can you name any others that maybe played an important role in the project?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we had the land, we realized it could be used for a higher purpose. And so we brought in McKinstry. We also brought in Katerra, who built has the cross-laminated timber to provide the sustainable construction for the building. And then also we have Eastern Washington University is one of the main tenants in the Catalyst building. And so recognizing the value of having the students, in the engineering and computer science disciplines be located right in the middle of all of the research and activity here is really exciting.
Yeah, is the university using this facility as some sort of a learning tool as well? Is that part of their curriculum to build these types of smart structures? Or does it just happen to be a usable facility that helps in their sustainability goals as well?
Our intent is to work with Eastern Washington University. We actually, this, development is in Spokane's University District, which has 6 total universities present in the area. And so we're actively engaging with multiple universities right now to figure out what type of engagement makes sense for each one of them, whether it be internships or senior design projects or other ways to engage them in the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and Heather, may I just add on to your comment about the, kind of engaging the students? For instance, one of the things that, maybe one broad thing we've done is the partners have actually stood up capstone program funding for Eastern Washington University to make sure that we engage the students with the work of what these buildings and the future of energy and the intersection of energy with utility and the built environment. So there's a lot of work that we hope to be doing. One of the things that we just recently got done working with a group of Eastern Washington University students from the Visual Communication and Design group is they actually helped create the way that we would tell the story to anybody coming to visit the buildings about the energy consumption and sustainability in the built environment. They actually created this wonderfully interesting dashboard that would sit in the lobby, almost like artwork, but telling an energy story about catalysts. And then they actually came up with these QR code and virtual, augmented reality kind of images that someone could come up to and put their phone with an app to and actually learn a little bit more about what's going on. And so these students did a wonderful job on that count. So we're looking forward to engaging them further. So thanks, Heather. I just wanted to chime in to kind of further your point there.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think that the partnerships and the different entities we brought into this with the students and with Katerra, McKinstry, and Avista really demonstrate the unique opportunity when we bring, from different disciplines and different areas that aren't normally working together at the stages of development of buildings in the way that they were with this project really is one of the main innovative things that we've been able to do.
Yeah, and just a comment on Katerra, by the way, you mentioned, Katerra as a partner, they were the ones that actually brought these, actually maybe an old school, but yet being reinvented wood construction, particularly for large frame buildings. They have been working diligently to leverage this research product and technology that actually came out of the Inland Northwest, particularly Washington State University. Heather and I have referred to it as CLT, or cross-laminated timber. If you've not looked up Katerra, spelled Katerra, they would be worth looking up and learning about. It's not just about cross-laminated timbers for them. It really is about re-engineering the entire supply chain of buildings, which we think is pretty critical at McKinstry, because buildings cost way too much to build, and therefore you can't actually make them very smart because you're done spending your money just on the basic things. And so if you get a chance to look up Katerra, for those that are listening, you think you'll learn a lot about cross-laminated timbers and the work that they're doing. One interesting part about the cross-laminated timbers is the embodied carbon that usually is in concrete and steel. There is really no embodied, it's more sequestered carbon in CLT. And so Katerra went out and actually hired, I think it was the University of Washington Research Group, to complete a study, and we're now finding that the building itself is very close to zero carbon in embodied carbon, which is really stunning. In other words, very little embodied carbon was actually created with regard to the materials used to build this building. That's pretty smart. That's pretty stunning. And we did all that in partnership with Katerra and others at no cost premium. So, I just wanted to share that little tidbit also. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's interesting stuff. So obviously this has been an unusual year with COVID-19 and a lot of other things, disrupting our usual business practices. Has that caused any problems with your project and maybe delays or cost increases along the way?
Well, I would say that right when COVID hit, one of the things we did at McKinstry was that we immediately started to implement, not just for the projects that we were delivering in Spokane on South Landing, both Catalyst and the Morris Center, but we looked very closely at safe construction site work practices. And we immediately took what folks thought were pretty good ideas, and we began to implement them. For instance, this idea of temperature checks, we thought not only good, but right. We actually formed a separate app to allow our people to check in and report, on a daily basis if they had any particular issues. We made sure that we kept, of course, the distances that were not only required as different orders through the state came through, but also wanted to make sure that our folks were outfitted with all the right PPE and that we managed both safe distance and all protection. Number one thing that we wanted to do on this project and all projects is ensure that our people were caused no harm, and then our subcontractors were the same way. Because of that, and because of the nature of the project, it was deemed to be essential because of the idea of the kind of work that was happening, and the fact that at that point, back in March and April, the idea was we were building a site house classrooms. And so that classroom space was deemed essential. So we continued. And thankfully, because of that, we didn't have any delay in schedule, and we did not have any significant increased costs because of the way we so quickly and proactively jumped into making sure that we set ourselves up mostly to protect our people and to protect our subcontractors. The standards that we actually set on South Landing development on these two buildings became the actual standard for how we created safe workspaces on all McKinstry projects. So not only was it good for South Landing, but it actually became our standard for everything else that we did.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking there's something else pretty relevant, as you mentioned, Aaron, with what's going on with COVID-19. And we've seen the recent California rolling outages that occurred. And, an article that I read tied a lot of it to people working from home during COVID. And then, of course, the generation changes that they've made over the years, and having some generation outages and low wind and cloudy days. And however, what we've seen, with what happened there was really due to a constraint in capacity, in generation capacity. And what we're trying to learn here, and what we think the value is that through this partnership with the building owner operator, and what McKinstry has built from thermal storage with the building and being able to shift load, is that being able to coordinate better and send the right signals to the loads that have the ability to shift not just how much you're using, but when you're using the energy. And the eco district and the buildings that have been developed here have that ability to shift the when they're using energy. And that was this key aha we had through the coordination of the utility and the building designer, operating together. And the kind of capability we have with this building are the types of tools that will minimize the need for rolling outages, in the future.
No, that's an interesting lesson that can be taken away from that. So that's interesting. What has the response been in the local community? I imagine this has to have rejuvenated the area that it was constructed in. You've got new buildings and obviously very high-tech buildings. So how has the community reacted?
Right, that's a great question. And they have been so supportive and very excited, both from, again, the universities, the development that is occurring in the area. And Ash probably has the most up-to-date information in terms of the kind of business interest that we've seen based on having these core buildings already built and showing what the area can do. So we've just been so welcomed, I guess, from the community.
There was this beautiful walking bridge that connected the existing university district that's in Spokane, beautiful area in Spokane, right across a set of train tracks. They put this beautiful walking and pedestrian bridge, and where it actually landed, and it went north is where the university district is. And it really not only did something to really rejuvenate this area of Spokane in this east central neighborhood, but it actually, because of the walking bridge and because of the development, it actually now created an extension of the university district. So sometimes we refer to this development as South Landing, and sometimes we refer to this because we're so clever. South Landing is the landing of the bridge. One end lands on the north, the one end lands on the south. And sometimes it's referred to as the South University District. And so between the bridge and this development, it's a beautiful story about not only the community engaging in Eastern Washington University, finding a place for really important programs, additional private entities coming into this development, future developments already slated, not only around the area that we're talking about here, but in nearby plots of land. And we've got this beautiful connection between the existing university district and the South University district. So just wonderful all around for the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Heather, I think earlier on in one of your answers, you said something to the effect of a healthy community leads to a healthy utility or something like that. Do you think this is a strategy that you'll use in other areas for the company?
Yes, absolutely. Both from a economic development and economic vitality for the areas. But then again, going back to the affordability, the importance of affordability for our customers, and looking even at, again, the business model. Historically, utilities have been incentivized to build, right? We earn on capital and build new construction, and that's the way to, serve growth. But we recognize there's maybe an opportunity for us to shift that business model and be incentivized more around affordability. And so if, people are transitioning to electrification from electric vehicles, if we're getting new growth with new buildings, and if we can use the same infrastructure that we already have to serve more kilowatt hours for that growth, that's going to be more affordable for all of our customers. Those fixed costs, those embedded fixed costs that are already, out there, we'll be able to spread those costs over, more customers through that growth of the electrification and the economic and new customer growth.
So Ash, from your perspective, is there any research and development that you're doing to create new sustainable solutions? Is that something that the company focuses on, or is that kind of beyond your scope of expertise?
And the answer is yes. We're not we're a privately held company that enjoys doing the right thing and by serving our customers and serving our people and doing the right thing in communities. But, there is a climate crisis going on, and we then feel a very deep obligation to not only continue to do, we hope, the good work that we've been doing, but also recognizing that partnerships with Avista have allowed us, specifically because of Avista and their thinking, to be blunt, have really allowed us to think very differently about how buildings and the grid should work together, as an example. And that has, because of that relationship and because of even the work that we're doing in South Landing and in other places. But I really give a lot of credit to our friends and partners at Avista relative to the spurring on of different innovation and thinking, specifically in the realm of the energy value chain and whether or not stopping the relationship of the utility at the meter and not having it extend past the meter into buildings, was the way I actually spent most of my career. Not that we were ever opposed to utilities getting involved, but utilities stayed on one side and we stayed on the other side as those of us that worked in the built environment. So now we're underway, and Heather's really put her finger on it. I mean, we're underway really thinking more and more about, well, what happens when you change that energy value chain? Can you make building loads more flexible, not just demand response? Can you unlock more data in the built environment, share that and serve that up in a way that then allows utilities to do more with their existing systems? And how does that symbiotic relationship work? Now in Spokane, in partnership with Avista, we built what we call an eco district. Actually, we call it the Spokane Eco District, that in particular serves these first two buildings by moving and sharing energy. But we are very much looking forward to the research and development and knowledge that's going to come from both sides of the meter learning. What is that sharing and moving of knowledge and information and operational dynamics in a building mean to the grid, and vice versa? What can the grid do at different time periods to allow buildings to run not only more efficiently, but to Heather's really great point, how do we actually do it in a way that allows energy to be ever more affordable? As an example, we have a very significant both thermal and electric storage system that we're deploying within our eco district, our shared energy. And at times we believe that we'll be able to run systems in different ways in the wee early morning hours so that we can actually take advantage of maybe better times to store energy, better time to create a thermal bridge between starting the operation of a building and maybe a colder or warmer summer day, winter morning. So I think we've got a lot that we're learning together, and I think we were always pretty frisky as a company. We've come up with a lot of really great ideas. One other thing that we've done as part of this project is we actually invented an in-ceiling appliance to provide all the mechanical, electrical, heating, cooling, and lighting. And so we are going to continue to invent and innovate, but we're very thankful for the relationship we have with Avista because they are really super thoughtful about what they're trying to do as a utility going forward. And I think we are learning a lot as a company by being close quarters to them and thinking differently than we've been thinking. One last quick comment. I mean, the built environment across the United States, non-residential, is pretty large. It's almost 90 billion square feet, consuming about half the energy in total, 75% electricity, and producing about 40% or more of all the harmful greenhouse gases. So, we've got to do something about the built environment. We got to create a better balance between the built environment and the natural environment. I think that starts when we create a better balance between the built environment and the grid.
Since you brought up the built environment, let me ask you this. Can any of these solutions be retrofitted into old buildings to improve their efficiency or improve their sustainability? Is it something that you have to build a new building to incorporate these things, or are there methods to get these into more and more buildings out there?
More and more buildings. As a matter of fact, if we can't have these methods, these approaches of moving and sharing energy be applied to existing buildings, then we will not really make the monumental change that's needing to happen. As I mentioned, there's almost 90 billion square feet of non-residential. On any given basis, even when the economy is hot, we might be replacing or adding, 3 to 5 billion square feet. But, it takes a whole lot of time to think that you can actually get out of this problem by building brand new. So a lot of the effort that we are working on today, including in partnership with Avista, is how do you take these ideas and how do you create different connections to existing buildings so that you can actually pull the data out, look at the information that really guides how a building is going to operate, marry that with how the grid is operating, and create the kind of visibility that is across the meter, both directions, how the grid's operating, how the building's operating, and then what flexibility in load or building operations can be brought to bear that can both make the building more efficient and maybe help the grid operate more optimally. So the short answer is yes, we absolutely see the approach that we're taking to be highly applicable to existing buildings. In this case, we just happen to be building new buildings. And so therefore, we took the opportunity to really super outfit these buildings with all kinds of the right tools and tech and equipment. But right now, we are expanding our thinking and actually currently in the midst of deploying the same idea on a number of existing buildings, both in the Spokane area and even outside of the Spokane area. And we're very proud of the idea that the thing that I think we have come up with Avista is scalable in a way that I think will be better for not just the building owners, not just the grid, but those consumers of both building services and grid services. We really have a high confidence that we've come up with something here that is really pointing to the future. It is pointing to something that is highly replicable, not some weird one-off thing you can only do when you're building a super special building.
Yep. And that actually is one thing that I haven't pointed out yet that is pretty important. What we're doing in the Scott Morris Center for Energy Innovation is, I know McKinstry has some area there, and Avista has some area on a couple floors there as well that will have space and we'll have simulators and we'll have access to the equipment, the heating and cooling equipment, the electrical equipment, as well as the data to be able to test different scenarios and different equipment and different operational models and just as Ash said, figure out for different scenarios and different situations and different buildings, how this might be transferable. And so we are designing this living laboratory in the actual space that we can have the university students and researchers and other businesses come and collaborate with us to be able to ensure that we are making sure that it is transferable and being able to replicate it.
I know, Heather, a little earlier on, you had mentioned, that the way a typical power company makes money is by building more. You build more plants, You build more infrastructure, you build more lines. How does promoting energy efficiency and promoting sustainability and promoting, good use of power help the company? How can you make this into a, positive, productive, money-making operation?
And that's why, again, we think that we can learn so much through this, that we can work with our regulators and we can suggest thoughtfully designed performance-based rates. I know that term is out there a lot, and some utilities are trying out different things. So we believe that we can be really thoughtful in what we propose in terms of performance-based rates. And we know that our regulators, they obviously have the interest of having customer affordability, top of mind. And so if we can suggest, different regulatory mechanisms that can align our customer and our shareholder interests, I think they'll be very supportive of it. We have a lot of aging infrastructure. So there's, we still, even if we're not building for new capacity, we have a lot of rebuilding infrastructure that we're doing. So we have a lot of that already. And it's just more about how do we minimize rates for our customers and still support our shareholders. And we believe that there are some ways to do that.
Well, you have both provided some great information. I'm really I thought this conversation and learning about all of these things is just fantastic. Is there anything else either of you would like to add before we wrap up the podcast?
Yeah, well, I'll just not to plug Avista anymore, but I would say that anybody that's listening and wants to learn a little bit more about innovation and what's going on, I really, really would highly encourage, and sorry, Heather, to put the spotlight back on you, but I would highly encourage you to reach out to anyone you know at Avista, Heather, obviously, or anybody else. But I think learning about Avista's thinking on this particular project and their thinking overall around what they think the future of utilities is. I am not trying to just be polite. I'm telling you that, across the country right now and every place that I get to go, we're not doing a lot of traveling, so a lot of this stuff is now remote, but every time I get a chance to talk to utility executives from the C-suite on down, I'm sharing with them very specifically thinking that Avista has gone through, and what they're leading on right now. And so I just appreciate the partnership. I appreciate the work. I'm excited about what we're all doing together. We're very thankful for Avista pulling McKitchery into the middle of this, and I'm very much looking forward to the future things that will derive from this great work that we're doing. And thank you so much for allowing us to spend some time with you. Always love getting the story out.
Heather, any last words?
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, Ash. You're always so kind. It goes back to, I think that's one of the reasons I came to work for Avista, is just the innovation that's really in its DNA, even with a 130-year-old company. And, one of our kind of sayings at the company is, how might we, instead of focusing on the why it won't work, but how might we, make it work. And I was actually just driving by the buildings as they're finishing the final touches on them yesterday with my kids. And I was pointing it out to them, and I was, explaining the sustainability aspects of the buildings. And, we're just at the start of this. And so that's what I would say is, it's going to be really exciting continuing on with these partnerships. And once the buildings start operating and we start, achieving all of the things that we know are possible with what we've done with the partnerships, that's going to be really exciting to talk about as well. So this is just the first, stage of the story, and there's going to be a lot of exciting things that come down the road from what we've been able to do with these partnerships. More to come.
Okay. Thank you.